In the world of coin collecting, not all treasures glitter in gold or silver. Some hide in plain sight, nestled in old drawers, resting in change jars, or casually pass from one hand to another without a second thought. One such hidden gem is the 1965 Washington quarter dollar. At first glance, it might seem like an ordinary coin, a common piece of U.S. currency. But dig a little deeper, and you'll uncover a rich story that blends American history, economic strategy, and numismatic mystery. Let's take a deep dive into the 1965 Washington quarter, its origins, why it matters, its unique features, and the surprising reasons it's still sparking interest among collectors and historians today. The 1965 quarter marks a critical turning point in the history of U.S. coinage. It was the first year the U.S. Mint stopped producing quarters with 90% silver and transitioned to a new clad composition. This change wasn't just about the coin itself. It reflected an economic crisis, rising silver prices, and the shifting monetary landscape of the United States. To understand a 1965 quarter, you have to go back to the early 1960s. At that time, all quarters minted for circulation were made of 90% silver and 10% copper. But by 1964, the rising price of silver meant the intrinsic metal value of coins was nearly equal to, or even higher than, their face value. This led to hoarding. People weren't spending their coins. They were saving them or melting them down for profit. In response, the U.S. government had to act quickly. The Treasury faced a coin shortage and was struggling to keep up with public demand. So, Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965. This piece of legislation effectively removed silver from dimes and quarters and significantly reduced the silver content in half dollars. Starting in 1965, quarters were made from a copper-nickel clad composition, a sandwich of copper core and cupronickel outer layers. This was a major change, not just in metal but in mindset. The Mint had to reassure Americans that the new coins would still be valuable, even without the precious metal. The Washington quarter had already been in circulation since 1932, introduced to commemorate the 200th birthday of George Washington, the first president of the United States. The design, created by John Flanagan, featured a bust of Washington on the obverse and an eagle perched on a bundle of arrows on the reverse. The 1965 version kept this design intact, but introduced a new clad metal composition. The Mint took great care in rolling out the 1965 quarters. In fact, they continued to stamp quarters with a 1964 date into early 1966, a strategy intended to prevent hoarding and ease the transition. This means that some coins dated in 1964 were actually minted after 1965, and early 1965 quarters were released later than you might expect. Interestingly, no mint marks were used on quarters between 1965 and 1967. This was another tactic by the Mint to prevent coin collecting from worsening the shortage. By not identifying the mint of origin, Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco, the Mint hoped to make all coins appear uniform and reduce hoarding behavior. This lack of mint marks makes 1965 quarters less distinguishable by origin, but that hasn't stopped collectors from hunting for rare variations and errors. For instance, some 1965 quarters were accidentally struck on silver planchets intended for 1964 coins. These rare 1965 silver quarters are incredibly valuable today. How can you tell if you have one? First, weigh the coin. A clad quarter weighs about 5.67 grams, while a silver quarter should weigh around 6.25 grams. Also, look at the edge of the coin. If you see a copper-colored line, it's a clad coin. If the edge is solid silver in color with no copper line, it might be silver. These silver planchet errors are extremely rare, but have fetched thousands of dollars at auction. The standard 1965 quarter, though, is quite common. The U.S. Mint produced over 1.8 billion of them, making it one of the highest mintages in the Washington quarter series. Because of this, the coin is not rare in terms of population. However, finding one in high-grade uncirculated condition, or with a full strike, full drum lines, on the reverse is still challenging. For example, a 1965 Washington quarter graded MS-67 or higher by PCGS or NGC can sell for hundreds, even over $1,000, depending on appeal and market demand. Coins with clean surfaces, strong strikes, and no visible wear are particularly prized. Beyond the technicals, the 1965 Washington quarter is important symbolically. It represents a transition period in American money, when intrinsic value was abandoned in favor of fiduciary trust. It was a moment the nation said, "This coin isn't worth 25 cents because of what it's made of. It's worth 25 cents because we agree it is." That's a big leap, and it parallels how economies around the world were moving away from precious metals. The Coinage Act of 1965 was an early step in the eventual abandonment of the gold standard, leading to the fully fiat currency system we have today. In today's market, the 1965 quarter may only be worth its face value, unless you find one in pristine condition or with a unique minting error. But its historical value? That's immeasurable. It's a coin that tells the story of inflation, government adaptation, and the evolution of money itself.